Welcome to My Hometown, the program that explores clubs, organizations, businesses, and issues across Nassau and Suffolk counties, and sheds light on the different towns that are making a difference.
Hello and welcome to My Hometown. I'm Bill Horan, along with my co-host, Nassau Community College student Matt Leonard.
Bill, you're about to meet Long Island's largest volunteer orchestra called the South Shore Symphony. Did you ever learn to play a musical instrument, Bill?
No, I didn't, and I think society is better for it.
I'm happy to introduce the president of the South Shore Symphony, Wayne Lipton. Wayne, welcome to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC.
Well, thanks for having me here.
And Wayne, tell us, how did the South Shore Symphony get started?
Well, it started, I believe, in 1983 with a lady by the name of Bibi Orzak, who got a number of musicians together to start a little group in Hewlett. And I read about them in an article in the newspaper. I think it must have been around 85, 86, and I tried out for the orchestra as a cellist because I hadn't played my cello in, I think, since before I got married, maybe 12 years before that. And I went in for the audition, and after I played, they said, "Okay, great, you're the first chair cello." At which point I thought, well, this is not a good sign if they're taking me as first chair, but I've been the principal cellist ever since.
That's really fascinating. You were the first chair to start the first audition. That got to be something special, right?
Well, I think it was more that the orchestra was very rudimentary at the time, and they needed some good players, and I came along and joined them.
How many members are currently involved in the South Shore Symphony?
I think there might be about 130, 140 people that are available, and of course we do so many shows and so many performances that there's a core of probably 80 that play regularly.
Is there a number? Now, I'm not a musical person, so some of these questions may be almost childish. But no, but like a baseball team, we think of 9, basketball, 5 players at a time. Is there a number when a symphony gives a performance? Must they have 40 to 44 or only 25? Or are there rules for that?
I think it's a good question. The music itself defines what size orchestra you have. So if you're playing something from the 1700s, the group tends to be a little smaller because there were fewer instruments at that time. And then there are massive pieces like Mahler, where you play with 8 French horns, and you might have 70 or 80 people on the stage. I think the number of string players can also vary. So you can have as few as 6 or 8 first violins and go up to about 12 to 14.
But when the total orchestra itself, would that be a number? And again, you mentioned a particular instrument. You might have 6 or 8 of them.
Yeah.
But is the orchestra itself, is that usually, I'm going to just pick a number, 25 or more like 75?
More like 60, I would think.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about a standard number for most pieces. If you have a romantic piece from the late 1800s, you might do better to have a bit more strings to give it a lush sound. But we're fortunate enough to have a lot of volunteers because it's a volunteer orchestra.
Where are your performances usually held?
Well, we are part of the Rockville Center Guild for the Arts. And that story, just briefly, was what happened in 1991. The volunteer work done at Hewlett High School had to move because Hewlett High School was then asking the volunteers to pay for the space. And being a Rockville Center resident, I thought it might be a good idea to consider Rockville Center because I had a very strong relationship with the schools there, and the schools were willing to host us for free. And so we moved to Rockville Center at that time. You know, the whole nature of a volunteer orchestra is one where the costs are very, very low, and it's an interesting business problem to how to have an orchestra survive in today's world, or any musical organization survive in today's world.
Wait, the terms orchestra and symphony, are they synonymous? Are they kind of the same? And where does a band fit into that? Is that just for men, women, or a mixed group that get together and want to play together?
Well, an orchestra is the form of musicians. It's the style of musicians. A symphony is actually a form of music. So a symphony is a large work written for a particular group of instruments. Oftentimes, organizations look for ways to name themselves, and I think the alliteration of South Shore Symphony was very appealing to the original founders. In fact, there's one of the original founders is still with us. It still plays today.
And that's back from 1983, I think
Yes.
you said, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow, that's quite a long time.
Yeah.
So who picks the music that you'll be playing at each concert?
Well, we have a music director, Scott Jackson Wiley, who is celebrating his 25th year with us next year. And generally, he picks the music, but my role as the president of the organization is to make sure that the music fits 2 or 3 different needs. One is obviously for the enjoyment of the orchestral players, also for the audience, to draw an audience, to keep the music director happy as a conductor, and also to vary it so that there's a constant appeal to everyone, the whole organization. So largely it's the music director, but oftentimes we ask the musicians themselves, what would you like to play? And if you go back through the list of things that we've played over the last decades, it's a cornucopia of music.
Wayne, I'm just thinking as you're answering questions, you have a great voice and a very commanding voice. Are you the one they use when everybody comes back and there's a little chatter in the audience? It goes, "I want quiet," or but you. I'm making a joke of it, but
Yeah.
you have that kind of voice that if you said quiet, I would be quiet because it's a
quiet.
leadership
No,
voice.
I'm sorry. I had to say that. Oftentimes I'll do some announcing, but so does the music director. We try to oftentimes not educate, but enlighten the orchestra attendees, not just the musicians, but the audience as well, and give them a little bit of information about what they're about to hear, more than just the program notes.
That's always great because me, again, as the non-musical person, when someone fills me in how the song came about or the music or something about the performance, then it makes it alive. It just brings it forward. Now I'm appreciating it much more, even in my limited capacity. Now, as the president, do you get to conduct the symphony?
It's funny you ask. There were, I was never trained in conducting, but there were 2 or 3 opportunities that I had over the years to conduct. And so I did conduct our Nutcracker performance 2 different years, and it was a lot of fun. The orchestra members were nice enough to not give me bad grades on my performance.
Smart orchestra member, right? Yeah.
And I think I also conducted a Peter and the Wolf one year, which was a lot of fun also. But generally we use Scott or guest conductors. And we also have conductors who specialize in certain areas like Broadway, because we have a tremendous relationship with the CAP 21 program over at Malloy College, soon to be Malloy University. And
now, again, someone who's conducting an orchestra, is that something somebody studies? Is that a particular point that people would learn, just like you'd learn the trombone or the drums?
Oh.
Or is that a retired person in a field or a retired musician, almost from experience that they become the conductor?
No, conducting is something you definitely study. There are people who take not just courses, but advanced training in conducting. Sometimes there are musicians who move from their instrument into conducting. I studied with Scott over an entire summer to learn just enough to be able to get us through a Nutcracker. But having, I think a lot of the other musicians who are in the orchestra conduct high school orchestras and other orchestras. So there's quite a bit of talent there. But it is a study. It's something you have to, you can't just get up and wave your hands.
And that's, of course, what most of us think. So we pretend. Sometimes we wave them. We see the football marching band, etc. But is it an actual course of study in colleges, or would people train that way? Or do you learn from a senior member and watch them do it?
No, it's a course.
It
In
really
music
is.
school, you would take conducting as a course and training or individual study. It's really an art. And people ask me, I don't understand. Aren't the musicians playing the music, and what is the conductor doing? Well, the conductor not just gives the tempo of the music. The conductor also deals with all the other emotions involved in the music, and so it's the conveyance of that information to the players that's so very important.
So almost like, I guess, a great actor would have to be. Would that be a good analogy, that they don't just say words? We see a high school play where they do. But if we really go to a play or to Broadway, they have the emotions. You can see the color in their face change, even just small movements.
That's an excellent analogy, and it's somewhat ironic that the audience doesn't get to see it. The musicians do. The audience often gets to see the back of the head.
The backside, right? That's what we know.
And there's some emotion there as well, just not as direct.
You are listening to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Matt Leonard, along with Bill Horan, and today you are being introduced to Long Island's largest volunteer orchestra called the South Shore Symphony with our guest, Wayne Lipton, their president. Wayne, my next question is, how often are these practices held, and what type of investment in terms of time would be involved with the South Shore Symphony?
We are very fortunate to have a relationship with Malloy College. Roughly 11 years ago, as they built onto the school, the president of the college at that time said to the South Shore Symphony, said to us that they would give us a home to play. And they felt that as a community organization, this was part of their outreach and an obligation to do so. We were ecstatic, and it moved us from playing in high schools and playing only in the community to now at the college, where they have a wonderful, wonderful stage. And so we play, our rehearsals tend to be Monday nights, and for any given performance, we can rehearse anywhere from 3 or 4 times to 6 or 7 times. And over the years, as we've gotten better and better and better, the number of rehearsals sometimes reduces down to as little as 2 rehearsals before a performance. It depends on the music we're playing.
Now, if we were to see the background of some of the people you deal with, would we just be blown away, like, high school, college, 10 years in this band or group, 5 years with this, 6 years teaching or something? Would that be shocking? Or do you find that half the people are gifted, they know how to play an instrument, but totally out of the blue, so to speak?
It's interesting. The orchestra draws a lot of musicians who became teachers, school teachers, some who are in totally different businesses. We have a couple of doctors, a couple of dentists, a couple of lawyers, but they're all people who aspired to be excellent as performers, and were given the opportunity in this orchestra to play things that are oftentimes very different, and play with some surprise guests. We've had some of the most amazing people up in front of us, and it kind of shocks people when someone like Judy Collins will come up, and then we hang out with her while she does a show, or when Keith Emerson was alive, we played with Keith Emerson. But we've played with some of the greats. The list is insane. I mean, we've had the opportunity to play with Tony Danza and Michael Morrison. Jimmy Webb has been with us, and we're playing next year with Laura Benanti. So, as well as classical musicians who've studied with some of the best in the best schools and best teachers who perform pure classical works with us, and that's on top of operas and musicals and ballets. We do it all, which is interesting.
Matt, the question just shot into my mind. I have to ask Wayne, of all the people you deal with in the orchestra, and this is a very large group, and we might go back a few years, is there like one that came out of a profession and you would say this would be the last match you'd ever make? You would never think that this man or woman would be part of an orchestra? And, you mentioned doctors and lawyers, and these are educated professions, etc. But is there someone who just had a very unique or strange profession and you wouldn't expect them to be a musician?
That's interesting. I'm not sure if there were odd people, but there are therapists we've seen. The doctors, I think, are the big surprise when all of a sudden you have a doctor who says, "Oh yeah, I'm a surgeon and I've been operating on people. And by the way, when's the next show? I have to make sure I'm not scheduled on that day to do some work."
I always think there would be someone there who trains reptiles or something, and I would think that would be really outside the group. But I thought over the years you might have someone, because in fact I hear that doctors and lawyers sometimes have their own groups,
yes,
either with the bar association or a hospital or a practice.
They do. I think it's really all over the place. We have a lot of students. who get a chance to play with us. I think one of the more interesting things over the years has been that we've had some high school kids who, as they got older, had a family, and then their kids have come to play with us.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, my son, Alex, played with us for a while as a cellist. He's an attorney now. He's in his 30s.
Wow.
If someone is hearing this and really they say, wow, I didn't know about this, it might be an opportunity. Is there a way they could, I guess you'd call it try out or volunteer? And should they be embarrassed? Like maybe they played a year in college, let's put it that way, or they played in high school. Is there an opportunity for them to try out or be part of this, or how do they go about that?
There's always an opportunity to try out. The music we play is somewhat demanding, and so it requires some level of expertise, but you don't have to be the very best. We don't have that many positions for the instruments that are single, so a flute or an oboe. There aren't that many oboes, and there's only two in the orchestra, possibly three. Same with flutes. So there aren't that many positions available. There always are positions for string players because the sections are so large. And people can reach us by just going to our website, www.sssymphony.org, or going on Facebook to our Facebook page and sending us a text or an email through those vehicles. We consider everybody who is interested, and sometimes we need subs. So just about every instrument can try out. I would say someone who's got 1 year of experience, it may not be the best place for them to be trying to figure out how do I play Don Giovanni the opera. It's a little more demanding than they might be capable of doing, and we don't want anyone to be embarrassed.
Gotcha.
Do you work with any corporate sponsors? And if so, how do they get involved?
The organization early on was one that our music director said, well, maybe we should just become a pro orchestra. And as a business person, as an entrepreneur and business person, I realized that we have to have a source of funding that makes sense, but we also have to have zero level of expenses. So there are no paid employees. I get paid minus money, which means I make donations. But there are supporters and sponsors, not necessarily corporate as much, although we have some corporate sponsors. We get ticket revenue. Not all our shows are free, but the ticket prices are very, very reasonable, usually $20 or $25. We self-fund because the orchestra performers are free. People say, well, if they're free, then why do you have to sell tickets? And the answer is there are expenses. There's accountants, there's insurances, there's music rental, which is very expensive. Rights, paying for the rights for a lot of music. And advertising. Advertising probably is our biggest expense. And then, of course, our music director is a paid professional.
I'm laughing because I'm sitting here thinking that when I was in the third grade, Matt, we did Christmas carols and some singing and that. And one of the nuns actually bribed me. She said, why don't you be quiet? And basically, by me shutting up, the group got much better, and I got 2 free ice creams afterward, where all the other kids got 1. Since I was a chubby kid, this was a good deal. I learned how to negotiate through music. So that's my musical background, so you know you don't want me involved. But I'm just wondering, is it ever too late in life for people to learn an instrument? I'm not saying necessarily play in the symphony, but what's your thoughts or opinions on that? Is that something people pick up later in life or like to get into now?
Lots of people return from having dabbled in it as a young person. In fact, I was dormant on my cello for 12 years and came back and returned to an active musical avocation. Some people start brand new, and when they have time, when they have the desire, and oftentimes they'll gravitate to a guitar or a piano. Some of the other instruments are a little more demanding, but yes, we have people who've begun at an older stage of their life because they are interested. I think it's a great thing for people to all have an outlet, and whether it's sports or whatever it happens to be, but music is a wonderful place to go. And if you're not really very good at translating your hands and your breathing into an instrument, perhaps the best way then is just to go and participate as an audience member to hear the great music that exists in this world
Sounds like fun.
live.
You were listening to My Hometown on the Voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. My name is Matt Leonard along with Bill Horan, and today you are being introduced to Long Island's largest volunteer orchestra called the South Shore Symphony with our guest Wayne Lipton, their president. Now, Wayne, do I need my own instrument to play in the orchestra, or is there some way if someone doesn't have one, they still want to participate, there's some way to make it work out?
The only instruments that are that people don't bring, very few. Most people have almost everybody has their instrument. The ones who don't are the timpani players. Although we have some timpani players who bring their own timpani, it's just not normally done. Percussionists often use the instruments that are there. But everyone else has their own instrument. So it's a dedicated bunch. There are some extraordinary musicians. I mean, just amazing performers, and we're just so glad to have them as a part of what we do. And it's not unique. They oftentimes will play with other organizations or be hired to play in a variety of ways. But we do almost about 10 shows a year. It's a lot, and so many of them play all our shows, and that's why we have a sort of a bench of people who also fill in. It was the most interesting thing to go through the period with COVID with this orchestra. And while I could spend another hour talking about that, I could just tell you that there was an interesting transition of how do you deal with live music when you can't get together as a group. Mm-hmm. And I figured out a way to do it and then implemented it with remote pieces that we put together, more than most other groups, followed by small groups outdoors, followed ultimately by these live performances.
That is amazing, because I'm just thinking of it like some sports teams, but even sports teams might be easier. The person go out and sharpen up their muscles and skills, but that an orchestra, a symphony, has to be together. If not, even if everybody is an excellent musician, even I could pick out the clinker coming out that they're 2 seconds off or whatever. A lot of time is like that. Do you have any interesting stories that if I was sitting next to you, we're both stuck in the airport and the plane is going to be 2 hours late, and we say, let's swap stories about our life? Anything that our audience would find very interesting about a war story, so to speak, of musicians or having a symphony?
Well, the orchestra moved to Rockville Center, and I think we were doing 2 or 3 shows at that time. And our conductor retired, and we had to look for a new conductor. And the first conductor that we had a little competition, 3 conductors worked with us over a period of a year. And one of the conductors was just extraordinary, beyond our wildest dreams, by the name of Ming Feng Sin. Ming is a violinist who studied with Yehudi Menuhin, and as a child performed for the Queen of England and presidents, and just traveled all over the world. And he was an amazing musician who had a small accident on his hand, and he proceeded to study conducting. You said about studying conducting. So he studied conducting and needed an orchestra to sort of start off with. And lo and behold, fate had it that he conducted us. And I remember the audition performance. He came up to the podium and he had no music. And I said, this was odd, because I think every other conductor I had seen had music in front of them, the sheet music. I said, do you need the music? And he said, no, I know every note. And he knew every note of every instrument. And interestingly, I thought, if I choose this man, will he stay with us? And well, he stayed with us for a number of years. And then finally, he auditioned for the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra and won an audition with dozens and dozens of other violinists, because he was a great violinist, which became his job for the next 20 years. But he introduced us to a gentleman who helped conduct for the time that he performed as a soloist that last year. And the fellow he introduced to help conduct while he was performing as a soloist was Scott Jackson Wiley, the fellow who then proceeded to stay with us for 25 years.
Wayne, can you tell us, again, I'm going to use me as the example of someone who doesn't often attend musical events. What are some of the things we should know about the time to applaud, the right way to act, what to appreciate when we go to see a symphony like yours?
There's no rule that is hard and fast about the demeanor one should have in front of a classical orchestra. If you like something, applaud. If you think it's great, applaud. Perhaps the only thing to do is make sure your phone is off and maybe not do any catcalls during the middle of the performance, unless it's something a bit more musical, like one of the kids' musicals, or when we did video games live and people were screaming and yelling. That was a great show. But I think the answer is just enjoy it. Just have a good time. Live music, no matter how wonderful the technology is today, to be able to listen to anything by anybody almost instantaneously, there's still something very special about live music. And anyone who hasn't been to a live concert will be astonished at how special it really is.
How long does a typical performance last?
Too long. My Scott Wiley loves to do long shows, and yet I think we've now realized that most attention spans are not sufficient to do 2.5 hours of show. Just like on Broadway, when they do a performance and it's a 2.5 hour show, you hear a grunt in the audience. But the attention span of people today is relatively short. So we tend to do a performance that's under an hour and a half of running music, which is about, let's say, a 45-minute to an hour first half and maybe a half hour second half. But there are some pieces that we play, like when we played Mahler. We're playing the Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony at St. Agnes coming up in June. Those pieces can go an hour. They can go 45 minutes. It's a long time. So the answer is we're trying to shorten it to make it more appealing to the audiences, but some of the works just go on and on and on. So
actually, that's very interesting, and we hear that so much with other sports and other events and our attention span, and that you should be finding it too with musicians who somehow you think they are up above that, but I guess it's common to all people, and that's what we live with. Wayne, what is next 10 seconds, a message you'd like to leave our audience with? Is there a website or something you want to tell us?
Well, be sure to check us out again on our www.southshoresymphony.org. Also on the Facebook page. I think that will give you a good idea of some of our shows. Do come out to, we're doing an outdoor performance in July. I think it's July 9th. It's a fireworks concert. We've done fireworks concerts in Rockville Center since 1993. And the Grucci fireworks are wonderful. If you like just fireworks, come on out.
Sounds like a win-win. We got to mark that on our calendar, Matt.
Oh, sure, Bill.
To our audience, we want to thank our guest, Wayne Lipton. He's the president of the South Shore Symphony. Wayne, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you both.
I'd like to let our audience know again, I'm Bill Horan. I'm here with Matt Leonard. We thank you for listening to this week's special edition of My Hometown.
We like to get your feedback on My Hometown. Send your comments to WHPC@ncc.edu. Nassau Community College, where success starts and continues. Till next time, this is Bill St. James. And remember, there's no town like your hometown.